What's a company secret you can share now that you don't work there? Story 1. They are out of business now, but in the early 90s I worked at Radio Shack for a year and a half. When customers returned items because they didn't work, the store manager would simply repackage them and sell them again as if they were new. When I questioned him about it, he said, "Hopefully they'll return it to a different store." I nearly got fired when I refused to sell a customer a CB walkie-talkie radio that I knew wasn't functional. The customer was heading out on a hunting trip and was buying 3 of these radios for himself and his friends. We had 2 working radios and the third was the broken one. In front of the customer, I informed the manager that the third radio didn't work because I had tested it. The customer appreciated my honesty, and we arranged for him to get the last radio he needed from a different store. The manager was furious with me and almost fired me. But I wasn't going to send someone into the wilderness with gear I knew didn't work. Ironically, a few months later, the same manager was caught stealing from the store and was fired. Story 2. At one point, government-funded refugee advocacy agencies were disproportionately approving young women, aged 18 to 25, from Syria and Iraq with histories of sexual assault for their services. Upon further investigation, my team and I discovered that consultants from these agencies were engaging in inappropriate relationships with these women. They purposely denied them employment opportunities to keep them financially dependent. When the women became desperate, these consultants would suggest private prostitution as a solution. I blew the whistle and reported everything to the organization's leadership. The consultants were gone the next day. A big meeting followed, filled with apologies, speeches, and statements like, "This isn't how we operate." However, within 3 months, all 6 of us who had reported or investigated the misconduct resigned from the company. Officially, it looked coincidental, but in reality, we were all systematically pushed out. Even worse, 2 of the most problematic consultants weren't fired. They were given the option to resign and are now working at other agencies, still dealing with vulnerable young women. Story 3. I used to work at a 600-plus room Hyatt. After 11 p.m., there was typically only 1 front desk person, 1 to 2 housekeepers, 1 phone operator, and 1 cop on duty every night to handle drunk guests or prevent trespassers from sneaking in. I started as security during the 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. shift before transitioning to the front desk. My job involved walking through the entire 30-floor hotel to ensure no trespassers were sleeping in the hallways, eating banquet leftovers, or using the parking garage stairwells to shoot up. Most of the time, I walked around with the housekeeping manager, who became a good friend. We chat and joke about the weird and nasty things people would do to hotel rooms. Pro tip: if a hotel has carpet, avoid touching it with your bare feet. The carpets might get deep cleaned twice a year and vacuumed after every stay, but they're exposed to spilled food, drinks, urine, vomit, and more. There's an ozone machine that deodorizes rooms and a spray that's applied to the carpets, making them seem clean. But trust me, it's unsettling how well this cleanup process works. Pro tip 2, working security at a large hotel was the most laid-back job I've ever had. I had full access and master keys to the entire property, including all the convention and banquet areas. My duties mainly involved doing a couple of patrols a night to ensure all the doors were locked. There were countless doors, back hallways, and specific floors, housekeeping, engineering, 2 kitchens, and 15 to 20 banquet rooms. Most of my time was spent wandering aimlessly and socializing with staff from different departments. The banquet staff were my favorite to hang out with since I often helped them unlock rooms or turn on lights. They'd hook me up with leftover banquet food, everything from wedding snacks to cookies, desserts, and breakfast tacos. After work, most of us would hit up a nearby bar, get drunk, and hang out. Eventually, I got moved to the front desk because I thought I wanted to get into hotel management. Looking back, I should have aimed for housekeeping management. That's the best route into the field. Front office work mainly involves dealing with angry business travelers. I'd never work in a hotel again, but if you're in your early 20s or in college, I highly recommend it for the experience. This has been a walk down memory lane from 2009. Story 4. I used to work for a rural ISP. One of our access points served 13 customers but had only 12 IP addresses provisioned. This meant that only 12 out of the 13 customers could be online simultaneously. Whenever someone from that area called to complain about connectivity issues, we'd log in and reboot the tower's radios. This would kick everyone offline and force DHCP renewals, ensuring the person who called could get an IP address and go online. However, it also meant that if all 13 customers wanted to be online at once, one would always be left out. I raised the issue with management, explaining that it made us look like an unprofessional, shady operation. In rural areas, upsetting one customer can have far-reaching consequences since they'll complain to their family, friends, neighbors, and the entire town. But management, led by a cheap GM with an accounting background, deemed it too expensive to address. To mitigate the fallout, I frequently handed out free months of service to angry customers, arguing that credits weren't revenue anyway. It was frustrating because fixing the problem would have been straightforward and cost-effective, but the GM prioritized penny pinching over customer satisfaction. For context, this was just one access point among many. We had 10,000 customers, and most of our larger APs were properly configured to handle demand. However, this one tower with only 13 customers was always an embarrassment for the company, our little shame. Story 5. I used to work as a receptionist at an upscale salon. While I was there, the salon introduced a new line of products targeted at men. Up until that point, most of our products were marketed toward women, but the executives noticed an increase in male customers and decided to capitalize on it. Every item in the men's product line was priced at about half the cost of our other products. The kicker? The men's shampoo was the exact same formula as the salon's standard shampoo, just repackaged in black bottles with the word "man" on it. When I asked the owner about the pricing, their response was, "Well, men don't want to pay that much for hair products." From that point on, whenever a woman came up to buy the original shampoo, I'd quietly inform her that the men's version was the same product for half the price. Story 6. I worked at a Petco in Alaska, and I quickly learned that brown and black mice aren't allowed up here. Only white mice. One day we received a shipment of brown and black mice, and management ordered us to take them to the vet to be euthanized. Also, all the animals were literally shipped to us in UPS packages. I'd open a box, and it could be full of fish, mice, or even snakes. You never knew what was coming. It was wild. Thankfully, my shift manager was an incredible person. She did everything she could to help sick animals, stayed after hours to clean their cages, and ensured the animals in the back got proper care. She genuinely cared about their welfare. Upper management, on the other hand, couldn't care less about the animals. Their focus was entirely on getting more customers to sign up for pet rewards or make donations. They constantly pressured us to upsell these programs. If I didn't pester every single customer to sign up, they'd deduct points from my performance, though I never understood what those deductions even meant. One time, an upper manager stood behind me for 3 hours while I was at the register. He criticized me for not being pushy enough about getting customers to sign up for rewards or donate. When I explained that I wasn't comfortable harassing customers, he got mad. He also yelled at me for spending too much time cleaning bird cages because it took time away from the register. Sorry, but I wasn't about to let the birds stand in their own filth for hours, so yeah, I took the time to scrub those cages thoroughly. Oh, and a warning, don't buy fish from Petco. Nearly every shipment we received was infected with ICK. Half of our tanks were constantly in quarantine, and we had multiple customers come back to tell us that the fish we sold them wiped out their entire tanks. It was heartbreaking and frustrating, but management didn't care. All they wanted was more memberships and donations. Story 7. This isn't exactly a company secret, but back in college I worked part-time at a Domino's franchise. The owner, Marvin Covington, was a fascinating character. At first glance, he came across as a short-tempered, critical penny pincher. He closely monitored costs, even watching over employees' shoulders to make sure they didn't put too much cheese on pizzas. Cheese, often called white gold in the pizza industry, was especially valuable, even in 2002. However, after working for him for a while, I realized why he was so meticulous about the margins. Twice a year, he sent out generous bonuses to his college student employees. These weren't just company bonuses, but came from his personal savings account, in the form of money orders with the memo line, "Keep learning." The amount of the bonus depended on the profit margins of the stores he owned, essentially a profit-sharing system. After I graduated, I heard he was trying to set up an education grant trust for applicants of the Farmer School of Business at Miami University. I'm not sure if it ever materialized, but it wouldn't surprise me if he did. Marvin also prioritized hiring and promoting from within. Every manager at his stores was a former employee, and many of them had small portions of their college education paid for by him. Marvin Covington, The Domino's owner in Oxford, Ohio, originally from Vevey, Indiana, passed away in 2017. He truly knew how to balance good business with generosity. Story 8. Back in college, I worked as a pizza delivery driver for Papa John's. Our store manager was a perfectionist to an extreme degree, possibly with undiagnosed OCD or germophobia. Every night, he assigned cleaning duties like mopping floors or checking expiration dates. Without fail, he would berate whoever was cleaning, accusing them of rushing or not being thorough enough. Inevitably, he'd take over and clean everything himself. He was incredibly particular about food quality and cleanliness. If an ingredient was set to expire in 3 days, he'd throw it out and order fresh stock, saying, "We're not serving that." He even went out of pocket to buy better cleaning products, claiming the corporate mandated ones weren't effective. He hired specialists to clean the fountain drink dispensers and ice machines, ensuring they were practically brand new. One standout moment was when he reduced a cashier to tears by shouting, "Would you eat off this floor?" No? Then it's not clean enough. He didn't mean she had to eat off the floor. He was just driving home his point. After the store closed, he'd lock up and stay until 2 a.m., scrubbing every corner. You could always tell when he'd closed because the chemical scent would linger in the air the next morning. Despite his extreme behavior, the store's cleanliness, food quality, and facilities were impeccable. Customers noticed and appreciated it, making our location one of the busiest. Ironically, the manager didn't see his own value and constantly criticized himself, believing the store wasn't clean enough. Eventually, he was promoted to a corporate position where he visited other stores to bring them up to his standards. The result? Many Papa John's locations in the area drastically improved seemingly overnight. Story 9. I've never told anyone this before, and I didn't do it myself, but if you ever wanted to steal from a store, Big Lots would be the easiest place. It's half a regular store and half overstock from other retailers, often with near expiration products. Additionally, depending on the manager, you can negotiate great deals on unsold items. For example, leftover furniture pieces from mismatched sets, like a couch from a 1 couch plus 2 chairs set, can be discounted 30 to 50% just for taking them off the store's hands. If they ask for a store rewards card, just use the number 867-5309. The rewards card doesn't benefit the customer. It's just a way for the store to track purchases for marketing purposes. The Big Lots I worked at also had 2 major sales every year, around Independence Day and Thanksgiving, where everything was 20% off. These sales are the best times to stock up on paper products like paper towels, toilet paper, and napkins in bulk if you have storage space at home. Storytime. Westwinern in Amon. I used to work for Ashley Furniture, and here's the truth. Most of the furniture delivered to customers has been damaged and repaired by techs in the warehouse. I saw countless couches get broken during the unloading process, and dressers and nightstands with scratches and dents. The techs would patch them up and send them out as new. In fact, about 85% of the products that left for delivery were repaired items. If you want to ensure you're getting truly brand new furniture from the manufacturer, pick it up yourself from the warehouse. By doing this, they'll have to hand it to you directly without opening it first. Make sure to inspect it before you leave. You can even ask them to open the packaging. It's part of their job. Plus, by picking it up yourself, you'll save the $200+ delivery fee and avoid the hassle of dealing with damaged goods later. Oh, and those large, ornate bedposts that look like they're carved from tree trunks? They're actually just 4x4s covered in plaster molded to look handcrafted. They're incredibly cheap. I accidentally dropped one once, and it shattered into pieces. Story 11. Here's a harsh truth about hospitals in America. The administrators who make millions of dollars a year couldn't care less about you, your family, or any patient. Their only concern is maximizing profits and cutting costs at every possible turn. The kicker? None of them have any healthcare experience. They're all business majors. They've never performed CPR or seen the day-to-day struggles of healthcare workers. They have no idea, nor do they care, how overworked nurses, doctors, and support staff are. Patient safety isn't a priority to them. If your mom has to wait an hour for her pain medication or help to the bathroom, it doesn't matter to them as long as the hospital is profitable. Even in so-called non-profit hospitals, administrators pocket absurd salaries. The non-profit label just means that claimed profits must roll into the next year's budget to show a net zero. But do you think that money goes toward wage increases or bonuses for the hardworking staff? Absolutely not. Hospital admins in the US are, frankly, the scum of the earth. I could rant about this forever, but it all boils down to one truth. They don't care about patients or healthcare workers, only their bottom line. Story 12. I used to work for a software company that specialized in call center transcription and analysis. You know that phrase, this call may be recorded for quality and training purposes? Well, believe it. Those calls are being recorded, and most call centers are using those recordings for analysis. Here's how it works. Calls are transcribed by a transcription engine, and any personal information is redacted. The transcripts are then stored in a massive database. My company took it even further by developing two advanced tools. The first tool analyzed calls in real time. It would flag managers if an agent broke script, angered a caller, or skipped essential legal jargon. The second tool was a cutting-edge AI trained on tens of millions of hours of call audio. This AI was designed to improve answering bots, enhance call analysis, and handle other tasks much faster than any human could. I left while the AI department was still in its early stages, but it was incredible to see the project begin. This system was the most advanced software I've ever worked on. If you've called a company in America, there's a good chance your call was recorded, transcribed, and analyzed by something similar. Story 13. I've worked at several market research companies, primarily in malls and at a big box home improvement chain, where I conducted surveys and paid participants for their opinions on movies, alcoholic drinks, and other products. The reality behind these jobs was a nightmare. Market research quotas were strict, requiring specific demographics like ethnicity, age, and gender. But most malgoers weren't interested, especially since we only paid $5 for 45 minutes of their time. This led to regulars, often desperate junkies, taking surveys under fake names repeatedly. The first company didn't care about this at all and let it slide. The second company was stricter. They conducted the same surveys but refused to bend any rules. Instead, they fired employees for failing to meet quotas or making small mistakes. For example, when we ran out of movie-related surveys, I was expected to stop malgoers and get them to answer questions about adult diapers or perfume. Then a tropical storm hit Tampa, and sewage leaked into the office, filling it with the stench of rotten eggs and human waste. Neither the mall nor the company wanted to fix it, and customers avoided us entirely. Despite this, management blamed me for not being confident and positive enough to attract participants. When they threatened my job over it, I quit on the spot. The third company was contracted with a big home improvement chain. Most of the customers were retirees, and my job was to ask about their water systems so the company could market filtration products to them. The retirees loved to complain about their water, but refused to give out phone numbers, which I needed to get paid. I was required to get 10 leads an hour, an impossible goal, especially after 1 p.m. when the store slowed down. I wasn't given a lunch break, and to top it off, they missed my paycheck. I quit that job too, telling them exactly how I felt. This experience made my New Year's resolution clear: to leave the market research field for good. Story 14. I used to work at a dental clinic, and here's the inside scoop. First, 3M would regularly send us gifts and free food for using their products. That's actually illegal, but it happens. And ever wonder why your dentist always gives you Colgate samples? It's because we get them for free. When they recommend Colgate, it's not because it's necessarily the best, it's just what we have to hand out. Many clinics are understaffed and overbooked, so the room cleaning procedures you're taught in school often go out the window. This can lead to infections. I've seen it firsthand. A little girl at our clinic got hand, foot, and mouth disease after a cleaning, and another got ringworm. You can get your dental records for free. They might charge you for mailing them, but if you show up in person, they have to hand them over. Now about root canals. They're dangerous and can have serious effects on your health, including your heart. If you've ever wondered why it smells like bleach, that's because we're literally using Clorox to clean out the canals. Regular dentists, DDS, often mess these up, so you should go to an endodontist for the best chance at a proper procedure. And yes, you do need a crown afterward, because the tooth is dead once the nerves are removed, and it will eventually break. Also, silver fillings are garbage. Avoid them. We know fluoride has risks, but it's incredibly effective for kids because their teeth absorb it more. Adults benefit less, but the money behind fluoride keeps it in use. If your child has too many cavities and you're missing appointments, we will call child services. Dentists are mandated reporters, and it's considered neglect. Here's a secret. We're absolutely judging your teeth while you're in the chair. We can tell if you don't floss, if you smoke, and if you've been vomiting frequently. We talk about it in the office. Many dentists are drowning in student loan debt, which means they may overcharge to help pay it off. And don't be fooled by appearances. Many assistants don't have proper hygiene. They just look clean. With that said, here are some tips to take care of your teeth. Floss first, then brush so the bristles can reach deeper. Always brush your tongue. It's a major cause of bad breath. If you drink coffee or soda, rinse with water immediately or lick your teeth to reduce sugar exposure. Replace your toothbrush every 3 months or when the bristles bend. If they're bending, you're brushing too hard. Stop that. Use soft bristle brushes only. Medium and hard bristles can damage your gums, and gums don't grow back. Avoid bleaching your teeth at home. It causes sensitivity. Decay is caused by bacteria that needs to be introduced. So be mindful of who you kiss. And seriously, don't trust your doctor or dentist blindly. Get a second opinion if you're unsure. Find a dentist you trust, get cleanings twice a year, and protect your teeth. Every time a dentist drills into your tooth, it weakens. Fillings aren't something to take lightly. Take care of your teeth. You need them for tasting food, maintaining balance, and overall health. Most insurance doesn't even cover dentures. Guard your grill. It's real out here. Story 15. I worked at a county animal shelter where we did our best to help animals find homes, especially dogs brought in by animal control. Part of our job was identifying the most likely breed of the dogs for adoption purposes. However, to navigate personal biases and legal restrictions like breed bans, we often fudged the truth when it came to pit bulls. If a dog was short with an underbite, we call it a bulldog mix. Black or tan coat with a longer snout, lab mix. Deep chest and droopy lips, mastiff or boxer mix. We'd slap mix onto the most plausible sounding breed to avoid explicitly labeling the dog as a pit bull mix. Everyone knew, of course. It was clear what breed they were. But it was the best we could do to give these sweet dogs a fighting chance. The heartbreaking reality was that these were great dogs, with no behavioral issues beyond typical shelter dog quirks like jumping or leash pulling. But because of breed restrictions in HOAs and apartments, covering 80 to 90% of our service area, potential adopters would often say, "I love him, but my apartment doesn't allow pit bulls." Our shelter had a no euthanasia policy, except for extreme cases like dangerous behavior or health concerns. As a result, these dogs would languish in the shelter for weeks, sometimes months. So we lied, and while the shelter director never outright told us to, they also never told us to stop. It was all we could do to give these dogs a chance at a happy life. Story 16. I worked at a major defense company that manufactured PETN and other highly explosive compounds like leadazite. The latter is so unstable that just the friction of walking into a room with enough powder in the air could cause it to detonate. You'd think a facility handling such dangerous materials would have airtight security and safety measures, right? Wrong. The security was abysmal. Semis loaded with tons of PETN were often parked throughout the area with little to no oversight. The security company hired to protect the facility paid its guards $10 per hour. At night, there were only 2 guards on duty for the entire site. The perimeter had fences, motion detectors, and cameras. Sounds good on paper, but none of it worked. The cameras were broken, the motion detectors malfunctioned, and there was no lighting. The guards didn't even patrol the area. As for the workforce, they'd hire almost anyone unless you had a violent criminal background, mental health issues with intrusive thoughts. You'd still be welcome to work there. The sheer number of safety concerns was surreal. If an explosion were to occur, the damage to the local area would be unimaginable. It's terrifying how lax the precautions were at a place dealing with such volatile materials. Story 17. I worked as a Halloween actor at a Cedar Fair park, like Worlds of Fun or Knott's Berry Farm, and the conditions were worse than anyone would expect. Management regularly pressured young actors into not reporting injuries or unsafe conditions. For example, I once slammed my hand onto an exposed screw while working. I got a Barbie Band-Aid and was told that if I made a fuss, I'd lose my job. Since I was 17 and loved working there, I stayed quiet. This kind of treatment was common. Many of us worked out of passion for the job and feared being blacklisted if we spoke out. One of the worst areas was a strobe light section that caused at least 1 seizure per week. Despite complaints, management refused to adjust it. Actors were also pressured to set up their own haunted houses before the season started, completely unpaid. And then there was the pedophile creep who was friends with the manager. He had a history of touching underage actresses during walkthroughs. Management refused to ban him. Eventually, the actors came up with a system. If a senior actor spotted him in line, they'd pass word through the house so the girls could hide, and the guys would glare at him as he walked through. He'd complain, but with no proof of discrimination, he couldn't do anything about it. It wasn't a perfect system, but it was all we could do since management wouldn't protect us. Story 18. I used to work at Costco, and while many people know about the company's great return policy, most don't realize just how lenient it actually is. Costco only has a limited return policy on 6 specific items: cell phones, tablets, computers, cameras, appliances, and TVs. Everything else falls under their member satisfaction guarantee. What does this mean? Basically, you can return almost anything at any time. Bought a printer 5 years ago and it stopped working? Return it. Ate an entire rotisserie chicken but didn't like how the bones looked? Return it. Bought a tree, never planted it, and now it's dead. Or maybe your Christmas tree is no longer in season? You can still return it. These are all real examples I've witnessed. Some people abuse this policy, but it's undeniably convenient if you feel like you didn't get your money's worth. Costco rarely loses in these situations, as most of their profit comes from memberships. Plus, they often get credit from manufacturers for returned items. Story 19. If you've ever gotten a hot drink from a vending machine, you might want to rethink it. I've worked with vending machines in all sorts of places: 5-star hotels in central Manchester, factory break rooms, and everything in between. And almost all of them are disgusting inside. Your drink passes through stale, moldy powdered milk before reaching your cup. Flies are often found inside, feeding on the residue. The chutes where coffee and milk pass through build up with tar-like grime, and the milk chute frequently gets moldy. The overflow buckets, where excess liquid collects, often sit for days without being emptied, creating a rancid smell and more mold and flies. Even at McDonald's, the coffee machines aren't much better. Staff, often younger and inexperienced, rarely follow proper cleaning procedures. They might skip steps like replacing milk containers or rinsing the dispense heads, which are supposed to be cleaned regularly. The result? Moldy milk builds up in the lines and valves, essentially creating a gross water slide for your drink to flow through. In short, unless you're okay with your drink passing through rancid, moldy milk, avoid hot drinks from machines. Story 20. Schools, especially those serving younger kids, elementary and under, are a mixed bag. The reality is that schools are staffed by people with their own views, morals, and biases, and sometimes these views can have a direct impact on how they treat children. If a teacher dislikes or disagrees with a parent's values, they may take it out on the child, even as young as 3 or 4 years old. This can happen whether or not the child has disabilities. If a teacher is racist, they may treat children of certain races differently. If they look down on low-income families, they may treat those kids worse. These biases might not be obvious to parents, but the children will feel the effects. I used to work at a school, which had been my dream job, but I ended up quitting because of the unprofessional and harmful behavior I witnessed toward children. This was during the Trump COVID era, so tensions were high and people were showing their true colors. I couldn't believe how some teachers treated children, especially those from backgrounds they judged negatively. As a parent, I've decided to homeschool my son. From both a staff and parent perspective, I've seen that schools can be treacherous places for kids right now. If you're considering homeschooling or exploring other options, it might be worth it to spare your child from a potentially negative school experience. The trust we place in the school system isn't always deserved. Story 21. A lot of people don't know how the federal government in the USA handles its budgets. Here's how it works. Let's say your office has a budget of $10,000 for the year, covering things like staples, printers, and chairs. If by the end of the year there's $2,000 left unspent, managers will do everything possible to spend that money. Why? Because if the office only spends $8,000, the budget for the following year will be reduced to $8,000 or less. To avoid this, that leftover $2,000 is used on things like big TVs for training purposes, popcorn machines, or anything else to justify needing more money. Even functional items like chairs, still under warranty, are tossed out so they can be replaced. On the flip side, some offices actually run out of money. I've seen situations where everything was spent legitimately, yet we were short. Employees would bring in their own printer paper because, despite the government's push for a paperless system, higher-ups still demanded physical copies of everything. The most frustrating part? Upper management. They'd know about shortages but refused to help, saying, "I don't care how you do it, just get me that paper by Friday." The system is flawed in so many ways, creating waste on one end and desperation on the other. Story 22. I used to work for a state-controlled liquor store, which made me a state employee. When Costco entered our state, they pushed hard for private liquor sales and lied to get people to support it. They claimed their bill would cut liquor costs in half, but that was a complete lie. The bill actually included a 27% price increase written right into it. Costco knew most voters wouldn't read the fine print, and they were right. As a state employee, I wasn't allowed to inform customers of the truth because it would have been seen as government interference in an election, which is considered corruption. Costco marketed their campaign as getting rid of the state's monopoly on liquor sales. What they didn't mention was that it would just be replaced by a private monopoly. Now, if you want a specific liquor, like Jack Daniels, it's only available from one distributor. Smirnoff? Same thing. No competition means these companies can charge whatever they want, and customers have no alternatives. Items that used to cost $10 now cost $25 just to get on the shelves, before adding the old liquor tax and the new plus 27% tax. People are paying 3 times more than they did under state control, and prices keep rising every year. On top of that, private companies play games with pricing. I've seen them force stores like mine to buy crap nobody wants in order to get a good deal on popular items. Then they'll go next door to another store and sell the same thing for $10 less, without any strings attached. Under state control, the liquor monopoly wasn't perfect, but at least prices were strictly regulated. Revenue from liquor sales funded ambulances, firefighters, schools, police, and other community programs. Now much of that funding is gone. I'm no longer a government employee, so I can finally say this out loud. Costco lied to you. Your booze was never going to be cheap. They just said that to get your vote. Story 23. I used to work for a payroll and HR software company whose name ends in city. Our system handled payroll for countless companies, including major corporations and celebrities. This gave me access to sensitive information like social security numbers. Yes, even for the Kardashians and other famous individuals. The company frequently asked me to do shady things, like fudging data related to work visas and manipulating Affordable Care Act, ACA, reporting. For instance, I once had to manually rewrite ACA reporting sheets for an entire company because their healthcare wasn't even close to affordable. I racked up tons of overtime doing this, so much so that my boss would joke, "I didn't believe your timesheet, so I checked if you were actually working, and you must have no life to work these hours." Many of my clients, ranging from video game companies to retail chains and even social media giants, had me involved in questionable payroll practices. Reddit, yes, this platform, was by far the shadiest company I dealt with. They'd try to shift blame for mistakes onto me until I'd show them screenshots and audit trails proving otherwise. It was wild to see how little accountability some major corporations had. I've been out of that industry for over 7 years now, but it opened my eyes to just how shady the corporate world can be. Story 24. At the hotel where I worked, there was an unwritten rule. Our chief engineer never told the owners about anything that could make them legally liable. One of the biggest issues we faced was massive mold problems. When I was tasked with gathering data for our 5-year capital budget plan, I prioritized guest feedback, which highlighted complaints like smelly or moldy. These keywords were the top issues in guest surveys, even before the company implemented analytics tools. Ironically, they based their analytics program on the system I created. Despite this overwhelming evidence, the mold issue was never reported to ownership. The business was teetering on the edge of bankruptcy, and addressing the problem would have required millions of dollars for remediation, core drilling, and ventilation fixes. So the mold was ignored and the cycle continued. Years later, I returned after the hotel was sold to a new management company. The old company had wiped all user files from the computers, but since I'd done IT work for them and was still an admin, my files weren't erased. To my surprise, I found 10 years worth of documentation, including all my evidence of the mold issue. As we prepared for a massive renovation, I made sure the mold finally got addressed. My documents proved the previous owners knew about the issue, which made them liable for the remediation costs. It delayed the renovations by 3 months as entire sections of rooms were gutted to the structural supports and rebuilt. The previous owners, now minority stakeholders, were forced to pay millions of dollars in remediation, preventative measures, and additional renovation costs like rescheduling construction crews and delaying shipments. It cost them a huge amount of money, but the problem was finally fixed, and the hotel was better for it. Story 25. In the early 2010s, I worked as a software developer for one of the giants in camera manufacturing in Japan. Unlike most of my colleagues, I was an amateur photographer and passionate about cameras. This gave me a unique perspective and made me curious about the company's direction, especially as mirrorless cameras were starting to gain traction, while DSLRs seemed to be on their way out. At company events like Nomikai, drinking parties, I had the chance to talk to high-level executives. Naturally, I'd bring up the growing popularity of mirrorless cameras and ask about their plans to adapt. To my surprise, most of them believed that DSLRs weren't going anywhere, and that mirrorless cameras didn't have much of a future. They were convinced that DSLRs would remain dominant. I was shocked because, as a photography enthusiast, I could see the appeal of lighter, more compact mirrorless systems. I felt that once people experienced the convenience and comparable quality, they'd switch. The executives didn't seem to grasp the shift. Fast forward to today, and the company has finally embraced mirrorless cameras. But looking back, I feel they were too slow to adapt, missing a critical window to dominate the market. Story 26. A friend of mine used to work at a movie theater, and the behind-the-scenes operations were pretty wild. For example, all unsold cooked hot dogs had to be kept in the freezer, and damaged items like crushed cups had to be stored for 6 months. This was done to prove to auditors that losses were due to damages or unsold inventory rather than theft by the manager. Once they accidentally crushed several large boxes of cups, and those cups sat in storage for months just so they could account for every missing cup when the auditor came. This system tied missing cups to soda sales, ensuring the manager wasn't pocketing money. In other cases, to cover shortages, the theater would resell tickets. For instance, they'd let a customer in, keep the ticket instead of tearing it, and then sell it to the next customer. The money from the second sale would go to cover losses, like unaccounted for concessions. One employee, who was essentially the theater's handyman and could fix anything, ran his own hustle. He let people in through a fire door for a discounted cash price that he pocketed. He was fired when management found out, but things started falling apart without him. They eventually hired him back under the condition that they'd look the other way on his grift, reasoning that the people he let in wouldn't have paid full price anyway. Story 27. I worked on a drill ship in the Gulf of Mexico for a major oil company. During one deepwater drilling operation, we experienced a massive loss of synthetic oil-based drilling fluid, a substance marketed as more environmentally friendly than diesel, into the subsurface, about 5,000 feet below the seafloor. We assumed the fluid had bled into natural fractures in the rock formation and sealed off the fractures before continuing. Our remote-operated vehicles, ROVs, which typically inspect equipment for leaks in the deep water, were later tasked by LSU to examine deep-sea wildlife. One ROV strayed about 100 feet from our equipment and captured something horrifying, a plume of dark fluid bubbling out of the seafloor. It was our lost synthetic oil-based fluid. Surrounding the plume was a massive graveyard of dead crustaceans, dozens or possibly hundreds, lying upside down. A fish swam by on camera and died instantaneously as it came into contact with the fluid. It was catastrophic. I was told in no uncertain terms to stay silent about what I saw, especially as a young engineer. Fluid traveling 5,000 feet back to the seabed through natural fractures is rare, but it happened, and the environmental impact was devastating. The incident scarred me for life, and I left the company not long after. Story 28. I worked for a virtualization SaaS company that handled hard drives, physical, virtual, or otherwise, by converting them into a proprietary format and hosting the images on servers for customers worldwide. We supported some big-name companies like Microsoft and HP, but our infrastructure had limits. Our equipment was built to handle 1,000 sessions at one time, and as our business grew, we routinely reached 800 to 900 sessions daily. When we suggested expanding our server capacity, management pushed back, citing costs and lack of space in the data center. Then came the breaking point. A client needed 1,300 machines provisioned by Monday. With no response from our boss, who was on vacation, we decided to provision the 1,000 machines we had capacity for and spread them across the clients, leaving 300 unfulfilled. We figured we'd address the fallout Monday. When Monday rolled around, the phones were ringing nonstop with complaints from customers unable to access their machines. The boss finally showed up, furious, demanding to know what was happening. We explained the situation and asked for guidance. His response? Lie to them. He told us to blame a back-end issue and walked out. One of the techs, disgusted, got up, said, "I'm out. Nice working with you guys," and quit on the spot. The rest of us decided we weren't comfortable lying and told the customers the truth. We were working on it, but it might not happen that day. Later that day, the boss called us into a meeting, berating us with a string of expletives and blaming us for the situation. I finally stood up and said, "We don't like the way we're being treated, and we won't stand for this." He changed the subject, asking, "Weren't there 7 of you?" We told him, "Yes, quit." A week later, I was fired for standing up to him. I sued for wrongful termination and unpaid overtime, winning $10,000 in compensation. Interestingly, my former colleagues told me the lawsuit caused the boss to completely change his behavior. He stopped yelling and cursing and actually treated his employees well. It was a bittersweet victory, but knowing I made a difference for them made it worth it. Story 29. I worked for a Fortune 50 company that decided to expand into healthcare, a field far removed from its core business. Over a few years, they built a healthcare products division through acquisitions and consultants, aiming to dominate an emerging market. However, these products directly impacted patient care, and the entire venture turned into a disaster. One of the worst stories was kept under wraps by the company's powerful PR team. They had sold a cancer treatment product to hospitals in a small developing country. Midway through the contract, they decided the implementation wasn't profitable enough and stopped providing support. This left more than 800 cancer patients without treatment during their ongoing care. These patients were immunocompromised and had no access to alternative care in their country. The company effectively abandoned them to die. Years later, my teammates and I learned about this when a PR team member bragged about how they had killed the story. We were horrified. Despite our efforts to bring media attention to the issue, we got nowhere. The company's PR influence was too strong. I left the company a few weeks later, unable to stay after learning what had happened. To this day, I can't stop thinking about those patients and the unimaginable suffering they endured. It's a haunting reminder of how corporate greed can have devastating, real-world consequences. Story 30. I was the fastest cashier at my Walmart and also a customer service manager. My store had a nickname, Kevin's Graveyard. The reason? Our store manager, Kevin, was an absolute nightmare. A horrible, abusive person who belittled everyone, called employees terrible names, and even dropped slurs during company meetings. He cared nothing for the well-being of the workers who kept his store running while he enjoyed fat bonuses and 5 vacations a year. Kevin paid us the lowest wages in the state and even froze raises for 2 years while padding his own pockets. I put up with his garbage for far too long, 4 years to be exact, before I decided to turn the tables on him. And I wasn't alone. Walmart had a tool called the price-changing button, which allowed cashiers to match any advertised price. I used it to slash prices for customers, practically giving away groceries to those in need. For example, one woman came through my line in tears after losing her mother and sister in a car accident. I knocked the prices of her entire cart down to pennies and wished her the best. She left saying, "Bless your beautiful heart." For my last year at Walmart, I did this every day. Groceries, clothes, whatever people needed, I'd price match them into affordable territory. Who knows how much money the store lost because of it? And Kevin? He didn't care. As long as his paycheck was secure, he was oblivious to the schemes right under his nose. Yes, what I did was technically theft, but I have zero guilt. I helped countless people who needed it and made my job bearable in the process. Call it blue shirt and khaki pants Robin Hooding. Story 31. I worked for a Forex company that, frankly, was a legal scam operation preying on people's dreams of getting rich quickly. The company used clients' deposits to pay its bills, completely unethical and illegal. They also outsourced their sales agents to non-European countries, which violated regulations and lied to every single client. Here's how it worked. false promises. Sales agents would advise clients to invest in supposedly safe options that were actually high-risk CFDs, contracts for difference. They never disclosed that clients weren't buying actual stocks or that they'd incur overnight fees if they didn't close their positions. Manipulative tactics. A mentally challenged man was scammed out of 50,000 euros of inherited money, leaving him 10,000 euros in debt. A woman tried to deposit 1,000 euros, but was tricked into depositing 7,000 euros after being told to refresh the page repeatedly. Devastating outcomes. One Swiss man lost his business, his home, his wife, and his employees after being scammed out of his savings. He was reportedly on the verge of suicide. Meanwhile, the sales agents partied like characters from The Wolf of Wall Street, indulging in vodka and coca at work and earning 10% commission on deposits. Most clients never got their money back and were too ashamed to tell anyone. I hated the company and myself for working there. Limassol, Cyprus, where the company was based, felt like a haven for shady businesses. It's a place where dreams and lives are crushed for profit. Story 32. I worked at Chipotle for 2 years, and while we had high standards, we didn't always follow the rules to the letter. Here are some behind-the-scenes truths. Food temperatures. If the food wasn't at the correct temperature during checks, we'd fix it but lie about the numbers on the paperwork. Cleanliness. The cleaning system was good enough to be sanitary, but pans often had bits of rice or beans left behind. Hand washing. We were supposed to wash our hands every hour, but we ended up doing it so often, every 10 minutes sometimes, that we often turned off the hand washing alarm altogether. Leftovers. Morning food was often just refrigerated and reheated leftovers from the previous night. Though we improved storage by sealing containers, it used to just be parchment paper and a spoon over the food. Food donations. Despite claiming to donate leftover food, most perishable items ended up in the trash because food pantries wouldn't accept them. Occasionally, we snuck food out or took leftover chips home in trash bags. Produce. While we were careful about expiration dates, some produce sat long enough in the fridge to grow mold. Typically, the entire container would be tossed, but sometimes only the bad pieces were removed. Other tidbits. Vaping. Most of the kitchen staff, including my GM, vaped in the back. Bleach. Although corporate didn't allow it, we snuck bleach in for deeper cleaning of floors and bathrooms. Free food. We often gave out free food and fudged the numbers if it went over budget. Meat. All the meat is pre-cooked, so even raw meat is safe to eat. Corporate quirks. We weren't allowed to put up any signs unless they were approved by corporate, which could take hours. Whether we were out of an ingredient or a machine was broken, we had to personally inform every customer, which often led to them yelling at us. Personal grievance. I was one of the best employees at my location, constantly praised by managers and coworkers. I was promised a raise, but due to a district-level mistake, the money went to others. I eventually got 25 cents instead of the $2 I was supposed to receive. To add insult to injury, new hires started at higher pay than me, despite my 18 months of experience. While I understand the need to attract new hires, it's demoralizing when experienced employees are paid less than newbies. Despite the frustrations, I still believe Chipotle is a safe place to eat. The people I worked with were kind, and I ate there every day without worry. I even planned to return during college summer breaks. Story 33. My previous company had a shady strategy. They'd convince their most skilled employees to train new hires and pass on their knowledge, only to fire them and replace them with the new recruit for half the pay. One day, they tried it on me. I was called into a meeting with the owner, top supervisor, and a new recruit who I was supposed to train. They proudly laid out their plan. I was to share all the expertise I'd gained through years of trial and error. I sat there silently for about a minute, watching them revel in their brilliant plan. Then I calmly replied, "No." Their jaws dropped. They insisted, "We need you to do this for us." I reiterated, "Well, that's never going to happen." The supervisor rudely asked, "And why not?" I took a moment, then responded firmly, "Why in the F would I give away what has taken me years to master? The very thing that sets me apart from my coworkers? If I did this, I'd be an idiot." I stood up and left the room, adding, "Funny how you mistook me for someone stupid." That was the last time the subject was brought up. I continued working for the company for several more years, and they never tried that on me again. Moral of the story: know your worth. If you decide to share your knowledge or skills, make them pay, and pay big. Don't let yourself look back and think, I was a fool to give that away for free. Remember, you're not an idiot. Story 34. I worked as a technician at CVS Pharmacy, which means I wasn't formally trained in pharmaceuticals. I just assisted the pharmacist with filling prescriptions and handling customer service. The way CVS operates its pharmacies is a nightmare, and corporate's cost-cutting measures directly affect customers' health and safety. CVS intentionally understaffs its stores to save money. On a typical 14-hour day, where we'd handle 500 plus prescriptions, 50 plus vaccinations, 200 plus deliveries, 100 plus transfers, and 50 plus phone calls, we'd need 4 technicians and 2 pharmacists to manage it all. Instead, we were lucky to have 1 pharmacist and 2 technicians. One major issue was the phone. With it ringing nonstop, corporate instructed us to ignore it because there were simply too many other tasks to complete. If a disabled customer couldn't physically come into the store, we had no way to help them. Tragically, some regular customers died because we couldn't get their medications to them in time. If a customer complained about not being able to get through, we were told to lie and say the phone was broken. One time, my pharmacist snatched the phone out of my hand and hung up on a customer I was trying to help, just because there was a line of 40 people waiting. The system is entirely broken. I tried to help more by coming in on my day off after a coworker texted me, panicking over angry customers. For this, I was reprimanded because corporate couldn't afford to pay me for extra hours. That same month, CVS threw a lavish event for its top executives, treating them to a private John Legend concert and a trip to Disney World. I quit the following week. Story 35. I worked for GoDaddy, and while my position was officially called sales and support, the reality was it was sales and support. Everything from training to meetings was focused on upselling products, not actual customer support. They called us consultants helping people with their online business. But the goal was always to sell as much as possible. If you were a tech-savvy employee who genuinely cared about helping people but couldn't hit your sales targets, you'd be fired. The company culture revolved around sales competition between teams, with no incentive to provide proper support. For customers, this meant there was no separate tech support. Every time you called about a problem, it was treated as another chance to sell you something. If your issue wasn't resolved and you had to call back, it was another sales opportunity. They made it increasingly difficult to cancel services, adding extra steps and stipulations over the years. If you're starting an online business, my advice is to hire someone knowledgeable to help build your website. GoDaddy will sell you unnecessary services and convince you that your business will fail without them. If your site is hacked or corrupted, they'll send you a backup, if you thought to create one, but they won't restore it for you. You're on your own or need to hire outside help. Over time, the company started charging for everything, even things that used to be done as a courtesy. Need a quick fix that takes 2 seconds? That'll be $25, please. GoDaddy's approach isn't about helping customers. It's about extracting as much money as possible while pretending to care. If you don't know exactly what you're doing, you'll likely be pressured into buying things you don't need. Story 36. I worked at an auto parts store, and one of the dirty secrets is how we handled old car batteries. Batteries have date stickers that indicate when they were manufactured. But if a battery didn't sell within 6 months, we'd take it to the back and replace the sticker with a newer date. These stickers came in different colors to track how long a battery had been on the shelf. For example, a green sticker meant the battery had been re-stickered after 6 months. If it didn't sell after another 6 months, we'd replace the sticker again with a red one, meaning the battery had been sitting on the shelf for over a year. Only after 18 months would we take the batteries off the shelf to either sell them as used or send them for recycling. Most common battery sizes sell before hitting the 6-month mark, but uncommon sizes like ATV batteries often sit much longer. I sold plenty of red stickered batteries and many of them failed within a few months. Customers usually had warranties, so they'd bring them back for a replacement, which we'd pull fresh from the warehouse. Pro tip: if you're buying a car battery, check the shelf for the sticker colors. If your battery has a different color sticker than others on the shelf, ask for a replacement. It's a simple way to avoid getting an old battery. Story 37. I worked in the defense contracting sector for several years, with one company specializing in tracking individuals to help law enforcement or military forces intercept targets. The system worked by dragnetting cellular communications over an entire city and sending the data to ground-based processing centers, where it was parsed for metadata. For context, Metadata, data about your data, acts like a digital fingerprint. Every individual interacts with technology in a unique way, and by analyzing these interactions, the system can identify and isolate a target's profile. Once identified, the system can track the individual in real time, and law enforcement or military personnel can move in to capture them. We worked with organizations like Special Forces SF, DEA, and foreign militaries to track targets globally. The problem? Domestic use. While the system was primarily used overseas, the testing took place in U.S. cities, specifically in the southern states. During testing, metadata from these cities was collected and parsed, essentially creating a database of domestic profiles. This system is fully capable of targeting domestic individuals, and while I wasn't aware of it being used operationally against U.S. citizens, it wouldn't take much to pivot it toward political opponents or activists. Key vulnerabilities. Cell phones are the primary tool for tracking. Metadata isn't encrypted like the contents of your communications, so it's always at risk. Any online activity can reveal your digital fingerprint, whether criminal or not. The system doesn't distinguish between criminal behavior and activism. It's just a matter of changing the parameters. The whistleblower. There was a leak a few years ago where a whistleblower revealed this program to journalists, and articles were published about it. Everything I've shared is publicly available information, and I didn't hold a clearance while working on the project. By the time I left, the system was on its third iteration. Why it matters? The existence of this technology poses a massive threat to privacy, especially if misused by authoritarian regimes. The genie is already out of the bottle, but raising awareness is critical. If people understand the risks and take precautions, it may help reduce the likelihood of misuse. For now, the only real way to escape this system is to disconnect from the internet and cellular networks entirely. While I don't know of it being used against domestic targets yet, its capabilities make it a serious concern. Hopefully, in time, safeguards will be developed to protect privacy and prevent abuse. Story 38. As of 2023, the shine has certainly worn off Subway, but back in 2010, it was a different story. It was also the first job I ever got fired from. After 6 weeks as a sandwich artist, I was pulled aside one day and told I was being let go because I didn't bake enough bread. I laughed, assuming it was a joke, because I'd asked multiple times to be shown how to bake bread and was told it wasn't my responsibility, that someone else would always handle it. The night before I was fired, we ran out of bread. I had warned the owners that we were running low, but they brushed it off. We ended up closing early, and the next day I was fired. I suspect the real reason wasn't the bread, though. A week before, their nephew from Lebanon showed up and started working during my shifts. He didn't talk to me much, and they were training him in ways they never did with me. Looking back, I think they hired me temporarily because they were short-staffed and needed someone to cover shifts until their nephew arrived. I also clashed with the owners over food quality. The produce orders we received from Subway's corporate distributor were consistently bad. At least 30% of the produce would be rotted. For instance, if we got a box of 20 green peppers, 3 to 4 would be covered in mold. Naturally, I'd throw them out, but the owners were furious and told me to cut the mold off and use the rest. While I understood their point about minimizing food waste, I wasn't comfortable serving food that had been salvaged from visibly rotted produce. I quietly continued to throw out anything I wouldn't feel okay serving. And then there was the tuna. Subway's tuna recipe is equal parts tuna and mayo. You fill one bowl with tuna, another with mayo, then mix them together in a larger bowl. I don't mind mayo in moderation, but watching that much mayonnaise being dumped into tuna turned my stomach. The same applied to their crab meat when they had it. Fun fact, about 90% of customers who ordered a tuna sub would also ask for extra mayo and pair it with a Diet Coke. In the end, between the rotted produce, the tuna mayo monstrosity, and the nepotism, I wasn't heartbroken about being let go. But my short time there taught me to think twice about where I eat and what might be happening behind the counter.